Let me welcome you to African Motives. We are on Economics Grade 10 revision as we are preparing for the June test that we are going to sit on. So we are on paper 2 of economics. Remember the previous presentation we were discussing economics grade 10 paper 1. So today I want us to look at paper 2 of economics economics. So we are going to prepare ourselves with the question paper that was written in Gauteng province, uh, June 2024. So good people, let us be together from the start of this presentation to the end of it. So that is that. So you know very well that the instructions are very important, even though I didn't put them here. But you know, instructions are very important. Before you attend to any question, you are to go through the instructions first. So take note of that. But because of time, I want us just to go straight to the question. So we are going to go to question 1, which is a multiple choice question. So this is where we are. Section A is a multiple choice question and is compulsory. Very important. That is a very important instruction that say with this section A, you are to attend to it. You don't have a choice. So that. So let's attend to this multiple choice question. Question 1, as it says, 1.1 various options are provided as possible answers to the following questions. Choose the correct answer and write only the letter A to D next to the question number 1.1.1 to 1.1.5 in the answer book. For example, 1.1.6 D. So let's start now. 1.1.1 is a monopoly. As it says, a monopoly is characterized by, and we're given these four options: differentiation of products, perfect information of products, homogeneous products, unique products. So a monopoly is characterized by unique products, meaning the correct answer there is D. The correct answer there is D. Monopoly is characterized by unique products. We know when we are talking about unique products, we are talking about those goods that are different from others, cannot be easily replaced. They usually have a special features or branding. That is that. So you can talk of, for example, of designer clothing, you can talk of Nike limited edition shoes. So it's unique. So hope we are together on that. Let's go to 1.2. 1.1.2 says the useful of goods of a good or service to satisfy a human need or want. So we are given these four options: value, price, utility, D, satisfaction. So the correct answer there is C, utility. Utility. So utility is the satisfaction or usefulness a consumer gets from using a product. So for example, eating food gives satisfaction. Hunger is satisfied. A phone provides communication and entertainment. You see, you are satisfied from that. So that is why the correct answer is C. So now let us go to 1.1.3. A complementary product of bread is. So we're given these options: rice, pizza, butter, and flour. So we're talking about what? A complementary product of a bread. So the correct answer there is C. Butter is the one which complement what? A bread. So butter is an example of consumer good used to satisfy needs directly. So butter is used for cooking, butter is used on bread. So that is why the correct answer is C. Hope we are together, good people. 1.1.14, which of the following is an example of indirect tax? Which of the following is an example of indirect tax. So we are given companies tax, value-added tax, income tax, government tax. So the correct answer for 1.14 is B, which is value-added tax. It's value-added tax. So value-added tax is an indirect tax added to the price of goods and services. So that is that when you're talking of VAT on groceries. So that is that non-zero and non-zero rated item. So value-added tax on clothing purchases. So it's an indirect tax. So that's an indirect tax added to the price of goods or services. Hope we are together with people. Let us be on 1.15. When a minimum price is introduced in economy, it is usually results in when a minimum price is introduced in an economy, it is usually results in we have a surplus of the product, higher demand of product, shortage of the product, lower price than the market would. So the correct answer is a surplus of a product. The correct answer is a surplus of a product. What is this surplus of the product? We know a surplus occurs when supply is greater than demand at a certain price. At a certain price. For example, farmers produce more maize than consumer buy. Or unsold clothes in shops. So that is what we are saying is a surplus of the product. When it says a minimum price is introduced in an economy, it is usually results in surplus of the product. Hope we are together, Christians. Let us now move on to the matching question. Let us be on matching question. So we are going to our matching question, which is 1.2. So here we are on 1.2. So 1.2 says choose a description from column B that matches item in column A. Write only letter A to G next to the question number 1.21 to 1.26 in the answer book. So for example, 1.27 H. So we have column A and we have column B. So column B is a description and column A is items. So we are going to merge these items with a correct description. So without wasting much time, let's start. So 1.21 talks about the supply. So now we're going to look at the description that matches the supply. So if you can go together through all these descriptions that are given from A to G, you can see, good people, that F matches what? Supply. What is F saying? It says the quantity sold at a certain price with certain period of time. Meaning to say supply is how much producers are willing to sell at a certain price. For example, we can talk of a farmer is willing to sell 100 bags of maize at 200 each per week. So that quantity is the supply. That 100 bags is the supply. So the correct answer is F. Hope you're together. Now let us be on 1.22, which talks about equilibrium. So let us go through this and see which description matches equilibrium. So you can see that B matches equilibrium. B matches equilibrium. What does B says? It says the point where the quantity demanded is the same as quantity supplied. So equilibrium is where demand equals supply, in short. For example, let's say at 50 rand per loaf of bread, consumers want to buy 500 loaves and bakeries supply exactly 500 loaves. So the market is in equilibrium. So the correct answer is B. Hope you are together with people. Let us move on to 1.23, where it talks about opportunity cost. Opportunity cost. So like 1.21 as well as 1.2, we are to go through the description and see which one is going to match opportunity cost. So if we go through all them, you can see, good people, that 1.23, D do match it. D do match it. D is a correct answer for that. What is this say? It says the value of alternative that you did not choose and gave up when you had to make choice. The value of the alternative that you did not choose and give up when you had to make a choice. Meaning to say, opportunity cost is the next best alternative you give up. For example, if you choose to spend 100 on a data bundle instead of buying lunch, the lunch is your opportunity cost. Hope we are together on that. So we are saying D is correct. Let us be on to 1.24, where now we are going to talk about subsidies. And then check which description do match the subsidy. So you can see G matches subsidies. D is the correct answer for that. As it is, payments made by government to promote the production or use of a product or service. So subsidies are payments from the government to support producers or consumers. For example, the government gives money to farmers to reduce the price of maize meal, making it cheaper for consumers. So subsidy is a correct answer, and we are saying J is a correct answer. So let us be on to 1.25, where we're going to talk about marginal utility. Marginal utility. So now we want to see the description that matches on marginal utility. And the correct answer there is E. E is the correct answer. E does match the marginal utility. So what is E saying? Saying additional satisfaction gained from consuming one extra unit of a good. So marginal utility is the extra satisfaction, in short. It's the extra satisfaction from consuming one more unit. For example, the first slice of pizza gives you a lot of satisfaction, but the fourth slice gives less extra satisfaction. That extra satisfaction is marginal utility. So F. So we're saying what is E? I'm so sorry. E matches a marginal utility. So let us be on the last one, microeconomics 1.26. Microeconomics. So which description matches microeconomics? You can say now C matches microeconomics. C says the study of behavior of individual decision-making units. Meaning to say, microeconomics studies individual consumers and business. For example, studying how local shop decides prices or how family decides what to buy is in a microeconomics. So, good people, we are saying C is a correct answer for that. So, now let us move on to 1.3, whereby now we are going to give one term for a given statements. Hope you are still okay. Grade 10s. Hope you are still on one page. So here we are on 1.3. As it says, give one term for each of the following description. Write only the term next to the question number. Very important. 1.31 to 1.34 in the answer book. Abbreviations, acronyms, and examples will not be accepted. So 1.31 says, in a no-fee paying school is part of this sector. A no-fee paying school is part of this sector. So we are talking about public sector. So a correct term to use there is public sector. As you know, public sector refers to goods or services provided for everyone by the government. You can talk, for example, public school, public hospitals. So that is why we are saying it's a correct term for this description or for this statement. 1.32, a market with many suppliers who sell homogeneous goods. A market with many suppliers who sell homogeneous goods. So what is the best term to use there? It's a perfect. It's perfect. So perfect refers to a market with many buyers and sellers and no control over price. That is a market. So, for example, we're talking about fresh produce markets, currency exchange markets. So the best term is perfect. So that is that. So 1.33, markets are not limited to a specific country. Markets are not limited to specific country. So here we are talking about globalization. We are talking about globalization. Globalization. So that is that. Globalization. As you know, the process where countries become economically connected. For example, importing goods from China, international companies like McDonald's operating globally. So that is that. 1.34, all of the economy's resources are being used effectively. All of the economy's resources are being used effectively. What is the best term to use on that description? Is that we are talking about efficiency. We are talking about efficiency is the best term for that. Efficiency. That is that. Efficiency. We know that is, you know very well that efficiency is about using resources in the best possible way with minimal waste. So, for example, producing more goods with fewer workers, you see, or using machines to reduce time. That is that. So, this is our section A, where we have said it's a must attend question as is a compulsory question. So now we are to move on to section B, great people. Let us be on section B. So here we are on section B. Instruction given on section B is that answer any one of the questions in this section in the answer book. But we are going to attempt all the questions in this section. So question 2, microeconomics. So 2.1, answer the following questions. Answer the following questions. As it says, 2.11, name any two types of subsidies the government grants. So types of subsidies, we have producer subsidies, we have consumer subsidies. That is that. So let us go to our answers. We have answers for this question. As it says, we are to name two types of subsidies the government grants. You can see we have producer subsidies, we have consumer subsidies, export subsidies, employment subsidies, as well as income subsidies. So those are our subsidies. You know, when you talk of producer subsidies, good people, it's whereby government gives money to producers to reduce costs. Whereby government gives money to producers to reduce cost. For example, farming subsidies, we can talk of manufacturing grants. So those are subsidies that government gives money to producers. Hope you're together on that. Then we have these consumer subsidies. This helps consumer afford goods. This one is all about helping consumers to afford goods. For example, free education, housing subsidies. Hope you're together, great levels. Then we have this one, employment subsidies. Employment subsidies. With employment subsidies, this is whereby these subsidies encourages hiring workers. For example, youth employment incentives, wage subsidies. So that is that. It's all about encouraging hiring of workers. So we have income subsidies. With income subsidies, it's a direct income support, like social grants, pension payments. Hope we are together on that. Let us go straight to the question on 2.12. 2.12. 2.12. 2.12, why is it possible for a single seller to influence the price of a product in a perfect market? So that is that. Why is it impossible? What we want. So now let us quickly go to our answers and see why is impossible for a single seller to influence the price of product in a perfect market. In a perfect market. So here we are. Why is impossible for a single seller to influence the price of a product in a perfect market? So perfect market price control. So in a perfect market, there are many sellers and no individual seller can affect the price. So meaning to say we are talking about what? A perfect market price control. No seller, no single seller can influence price because there are many sellers and buyers. That's what we are saying. Example for vegetable market, stock market. So there are many sellers. So um, a single a single seller cannot influence the price. Prices in a perfect market are determined by the market forces of demand and supply. Therefore, the sellers are price takers. So the sellers are price takers. So that is what we mean. So that is that when you are saying prices in a perfect market are determined by market forces of demand and supply. So sellers, then they are price takers. So they are price takers. They are to take the price that is there, which is driven by the market forces. And there is a perfect information in the perfect market. So as a result, buyers will buy products from other sellers should one seller increases his or her prices because there is information. They will be informed about the price of the product. So once one seller increases his prices, it means that they will shift to the rivals. They will buy from competitors. A single seller will lose profit should he sell products at a price which is lower than the market price. So once you set your price below, it means now you are not going to make profit. You are going to make a loss. So that is why we are saying it is very, very impossible for single seller to influence the price of product in a perfect market. So now let us move on to another question, 2.2. 2.2. So here we are on 2.2. So on 2.2, we are to study the cartoon below. We are to study the cartoon below and answer the questions that follow. So here is our cartoon, which is all about market structures in South Africa. Market structures in South Africa. And you see here we have what you call the little engine. So the fiscus, the economy, are actually that cold. So this is the information that is in this cartoon. So now let us see what are the questions. The first question, 2.1, says, identify the imperfect market structure in which Transnet operates. Identify the imperfect market structure in which Transnet operates. So here we can see that you're talking about monopoly, because a market with only one seller, it's a monopoly. So we can go to our answers and say, as it says, identify the imperfect market structure in which Transnet operates. That is monopoly. So that is whereby we know monopoly is a market with only one seller. So that is that. You can talk of Eskom as well as its only seller as of electricity. Transnet, we are talking about rail transport. So that is why we are saying that is imperfect market. They are falling under imperfect market. So let us be on to another question. So the other question says, name other company functioning in the above mentioned market structure. Mention other company functioning in the above market structure, imperfect market structure. So we can talk of Eskom. Eskom is the only seller as well. Eskom is only seller of electricity, a market with only one seller. Eskom is one of those. So let us be on our answers. So here are other companies. You can see Eskom, Dinel, Telecom. So you just accept any correct relevant response. So now let us be on to another question. 2.23, briefly explain the term monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition. So when you talk of monopolistic competition, group people, we are talking about many sellers selling slightly different products. Many sellers selling slightly different products. For example, restaurants, clothing brands. So that is that. That is, they fall under monopolistic competition. So yeah, you can see the answers are here as well. So monopolistic competition, we are to explain that. It is a type of imperfect market which consists of a large number of sellers who sell differentiated products. Or it is a market structure which combines elements of monopoly and perfect markets. Like I've said, it's many sellers selling slightly different products, like restaurants, clothing brands, like I've said. So now let's quickly go to 2.24. 2.24, what favorable conditions can business in the market shown in the cartoon above enjoy? What favorable conditions can businesses in the market shown in the cartoon above? So we're talking about favorable conditions in monopoly. So this is where the firm has full control and no competition. Here, this is whereby the business here in this cartoon that is shown by this cartoon is that the firm has full control, no competition. So it simple says, for example, setting high prices, blocking new competitors, for example. So that is that. So we can go to our answers. So that is that. What favorable conditions can business in the market shown in the cartoon above and enjoy? Transnet is the only freight rail operator in South Africa. So meaning they have full control as there is no competition. As well as Transnet, there's no competition. Therefore, they are price setter. So they can set high prices. The entry to a freight rail market is restricted. So it means they are blocking new competitors because it's not cheaper. It's not cheap to enter into that industry. So that is that. Let us be on 2.25. 2.25, how is the perfect market characterized based on the nature of products and entry barriers? So perfect market characteristics, products are identical and entry is not easy. So as in products are identical, entry is easy. So examples that you can make there, let us just be on to the answers and then try to make it easy. How is a perfect market characterized based on the nature of the products and entry barriers? The products is sold in a perfect market are homogeneous. That is what we are saying. They are identical. The entry to perfect market is unrestricted. So making it easy to enter and leave the market, like you're saying, entry is easy. So that is that. So now let us go to 2.23. Let us go to 2.3. 2.3 says, study the table below and answer the questions that follow. We have production units of tables and chairs. So production output units, we have tables, we have chairs. We have tables as well as chairs. So the question now says, identify the number of tables that can be produced when all resources are used to produce chairs. So you are talking about productive efficiency. So producing goods at the lowest cost using all resources. So the question was, identify the number of tables that can be produced. Number of tables that can be produced when all resources are used to produce chairs. So that is 2.3. So that is that, whereby we are to identify the number of tables that can be produced when all resources are used to produce chairs. So used to produce what? Chairs. So the correct answer is 0. The correct answer is 0. So factory using machines effectively, no waste in production. So the correct answer there is 0. So now let us move on to 2.32. Name type of efficiency if all resources are used optimally. Name type of efficiency if all resources are used optimally. So that is 2.31. So we are to name type of efficiency. So the type of efficiency if all resources are used effectively or are used optimally is productive efficiency. It's productive efficiency. Meaning to say, we are saying that is producing goods at the lowest cost using all resources. For example, factory using machines efficiently, no waste in production. So we call that productive efficiency. We call that productive efficiency. That is that. So that is that whereby we were asked to name type of efficiency if all resources are used optimally. So that is productive efficiency, like I've said, that is where you produce goods at the lowest cost using all resources. Using all resources. So that is that. So now let us go to 2.33 question. 2.33 question says, briefly explain the term Pareto inefficiency. Briefly explain the term Pareto inefficiency. Pareto inefficiency, this is whereby we are saying resources are not used in the best way. Someone could be better without harming others. We are saying resources are not used in the best way. Someone could be better off without harming others. So we can talk of, for example, idle workers and used machinery. So that is why we're saying resources are not used in the best way. That is Pareto inefficiency. So let us go and see the answers. So the Pareto inefficiency, as it says, it is a type of imperfect market which consists of a large number of sellers who sell differentiated products. So it is a market structure which combines elements of monopoly and a perfect market. That is a Pareto inefficiency. So now let us go to 2.34. 2.34, what is the purpose of production possibility curve? What is the purpose of production possibility curve? So let us be on that. Purpose of production possibility curve, we're talking about PPC. So the PPC shows the possible combination of goods that can be produced with the limited resources available to the producer. So it means that the PPC shows combination of goods that can be produced. For example, producing cars versus trucks, producing food versus clothing. So that's where that it shows the possible combination of goods that can be produced with the limited resources available to the producer. Hope we are together on that. So now let us be on to another questions. 2.35. 2.35 5, as it says, using the table in the case study above, calculate the opportunity cost if 20 tables are produced instead of 10 tables. So you show calculations. That is 2.35. 2.35. So now let us be on the answers on 2.35. As it says, using the table in the case study above, you are to calculate the opportunity cost. If 20 tables are produced instead of 10 tables. So original quantity is 10 tables is equal to 30 chairs. And 20 tables is equal to 15 chairs. All these are on that table. So 30 minus 15 tables is equal to 15 chairs. So we are going to subtract 15 from our 30. 15 chairs from the 30 chairs. So now we're going to get on 15 chairs. So the opportunity cost is 15 chairs. The opportunity cost is 15 chairs. Hope we are together on that. So now let us go to 2.4. 2.4. 2.4, we are to explain the cost of production and number of suppliers as factors that cause a change in quantity supplied. That is 2.4. So we are asked to explain the cost of production and number of suppliers as factors that cause a change in quantity supply. So we are talking about cost of production. So it means that if lower cost increase supply, higher cost decrease supply. That is that. Lower cost increase supply and higher cost decrease supply. For example, cheap raw materials increases supply, but high wages reduces supply. That is how we can explain the cost of production and number of suppliers as factors that cause change in quantity supply. So we have answers again that we can see. Here it is. Cost of production and number of suppliers as a factor that cause change in the quantity supply. If the cost of production such as labor, raw materials, equipment, and etc. decreases, it means the quantity that producers are willing to supply at a given price will increase. Like I've said, if lower costs increase supply, that is what this statement means, but higher cost decreases supply. As it is, producers with lower costs will always be able to supply more of product at a given price because it is cheaper for them to produce goods. That is that. Supply of product will decrease with an increase in the cost of production. So an increase in the production cost will make it difficult for business to produce goods and services. So that is that. So number of suppliers, if there is an increase in the suppliers in the market, the quantity supplied will also be increased. But if there are suppliers leaving the market, it will decrease the quantity supplied. So that is that for question 2.4. So now let us be on to 2.5. Let us be on 2.5. 2.5. Question 1.25 says, analyze the internal reasons why production, possible curve, that is PPC, will shift outwards. So let's quickly go to the answers for that question. That is 2.5. Remember, it says, analyze the internal reasons why production, possibility curve will shift outwards. So first answer says, improving product techniques can cause an outward movement of the PPC because of more efficient production. So we are talking about the improved techniques. We are talking about improved techniques. Better methods increases production. That is how simple it is. We are saying better methods increases production. That is when you're talking about the improved techniques. For example, automation, you can talk about faster machines. Those are improved techniques, and then they will increase our production. The use of new improved technology can cause a shift of the PPC because of an increased production level. So we're talking about technology here, that new technology increases the output. For example, robots in factories, computer systems. That is that. That is the new improved technology that we're talking about. So now let us move on. Increased motivation of employees can cause outward movement of the PPC. Here we are talking about worker motivation. Motivated workers produce more. For example, when you're giving them bonuses, when you're giving them promotions, they will be motivated and they will work more. That is that. Improving the skills level of the employees means they would be able to produce more. Skills improvement. Skilled workers are more productive. So they are competent enough to deliver because they're skilled. For example, training programs, education. So keeping the employees trained, that is how they can be able to produce more. So that is that. That is 2.5. Now we are to go to question 3. Now we are to attend to question 3. We are to attend to question 3. So here is our question 3. Microeconomics. 3.1. 3.1 says, answer the following questions. 3.1, name any 2 requirements of establishment of a market. Name any 2 requirements of establishment of market. So let's quickly go to answers for 3.1. So here it is. Name 2 requirements of the establishment of market. So it says at least 1 buyer and 1 seller. That is that. So at least 1 buyer. So that is when you're talking about conditions needed for a market to exist. At least 1 buyer or 1 seller. 1 buyer and seller interaction. So that is that. Agreement or on price. So that is that. Also, it says sellers must have a good or service to sell and be willing to sell. So that is that, as we are saying, sellers must have a goods and service to sell and be willing to sell. Is one of the requirements of the establishment market. So you cannot say you're a seller whereas you don't have a good to sell. And then if you have goods, make sure that you are willing to sell those goods. That is the requirement for establishment of the market. Buyers should have means to pay for goods. So we said for a market to say this is a market and if the market is existing, that is when we have a seller and when we have a buyer. So those buyers also, they must have a means to buy those goods. Agreement on price and quantity between buyer and seller. So that is when those there is an agreement between these 2 parties, buyer and the seller. Also, we are saying transactions should be formalized according to laws. So that is that for our question 3.11. So now let us go to 3.12. 3.212 says, why does the government provide public goods? Reason for a government providing public goods. So that is that. So let's quickly go to our answers. Why does a government provide public goods? Because the private sector finds it unprofitable to provide these goods, and as a result, they are undersupplied by the market. It's because of the private sector avoids them due to low profit. That is the reason. It's where private sector avoids them because of those goods have got a low profit. For example, roads, street lighting, and stuff. So that is that. The private sector will charge a price for public goods, and as a result, the poor and low-income earners will not be able to afford these goods. So private sector is going to charge a price for those public goods. So you find that those who earn little is going to be difficult for them to afford those goods. So that is one of the reasons why government provide public goods. Hope we are together on that. So now let us quickly go to question 3.2. Let us be on 3.2. 3.2. So here we are on 3.2, whereby we are to study the table. As it says, study the following table and answer the questions that follow. So our table is all about marginal utility of the hamburgers eaten. So we have quantity of these hamburgers and the marginal utility of them. As you can see, this is what you're talking about. So 3.1 is which hamburger gives the greatest satisfaction? We're talking about utility now. We're talking about utility. Which hamburger gives the greatest satisfaction? So now we are to go to our answers. Which hamburger gives the greatest satisfaction? You can see the first hamburger. The first hamburger gives the greatest utility or gives the greatest satisfaction. First hamburger. The first hamburger, which is this one, is its marginal utility is 60. So it means it gives what? A greatest satisfaction. Hope you're together on that. So that is that. When will the consumer in the situation above experience diminishing marginal utility? Here we're talking about diminishing marginal utility. So that is where satisfaction decreases as more units are consumed. This is that. Satisfaction decreases as more units are consumed. That's when we're talking about diminishing marginal utility. So let us get to our answers. That is when will the consumer in the situation above experience diminishing marginal utility? After consuming the first hamburger. After consuming first hamburger, because we know first burger tastes best. So that is, for example, first burger tastes first, but the second drink less enjoyable. So that is that after consuming the first burger, that is when that will happen, diminishing manageable marginal utility. Like I've said, that is when satisfaction decreases as more units are now being consumed. So this will happen after consuming the first burger. Hope we are together on that. Briefly explain the term marginal utility curve. Briefly explain the term marginal utility curve. So we have to explain marginal utility curve. So we are to explain the term marginal utility curve. So when we're talking about marginal utility curve, this curve shows the extra satisfaction from consuming a product decreases as more units are consumed. So it is usually a downward sloping. Get me straight, good people. When you're talking about marginal utility curve, this curve shows how the extra satisfaction from consuming a product decreases as more units are consumed. So it is usually a downward sloping. For example, as you drink more cold drinks, each additional glass gives less satisfaction. Another example, eating many chips, the first few taste great, but later you feel full and enjoy them less. That is when you're talking about the marginal utility curve. Hope you understand what I'm saying, good people. So let us now be on those answers. Term marginal utility curve, like I've already explained it, says the marginal utility curve has a negative gradient and it slopes downward from the top left to the bottom right. The slope of the marginal utility curve is a downward sloping. Like I've said, that is a downward sloping because of, we are saying, the curve just shows extra satisfaction from consuming your product. So it decreases as more units are consumed. So that is what we are saying is a downward sloping, which explains that the first unit yields good. The first unit yields more satisfaction. And when more is consumed, marginal utility now drops. Like I talk about, you are eating those chips, the first few tastes are great. That is what we're saying. The first unit yields more satisfaction. But when more consumed, marginal utility drops. That is when now, when you eat the first few chips, taste great, but later you feel full. Now you're no longer going to enjoy them. That's what it means now. Let's quickly go to 3.2, 3.24. 3.24 says, what is the relationship between utility and demand for a product? What is the relationship between utility and the demand for a product? So now we're talking about, the answer is there is a direct relationship. The answer is there is a direct relationship. When utility, that is when you're talking about satisfaction. When utility is high, that's when you're talking about satisfaction. Demand is high. That is what I'm saying. There is a direct relationship. When utility decreases, demand also decreases. So you see why I'm saying there is a direct relationship. For example, let's make an example so that it can be very understandable. If a new phone gives high satisfaction, many people want to buy it. That's when you're talking about high demand with people. But if a product becomes boring or less useful, people will buy less of it. That is why I'm saying there is a direct relationship. So let us go to the answers that are given and then try to see it. So here, that is why is the relationship between utility and demand for product. So the greater the satisfaction gained from consuming a product, the greater the demand and vice versa. That is why I said there is a direct relationship. That is why I said there is a direct relationship. So that is that. So let us be on 3.25. 3.25, use the information from the above table to draw a clearly labeled marginal utility graph. So you use the information from the above table, which is this one, to draw a clearly labeled marginal utility graph. So you're going to use the information to draw marginal utility graph. So you are to explain the explanation of the graph. You know, on the x-axis, we are going to have a quantity of hamburgers, which is going to be 0 from 7. Y-axis marginal utility from 0, 60, 55, 35, 20, 0, as well as our -5. This will be on our y-axis. These are on our y-axis when you draw that. This is our y-axis. Y-axis. But on your x-axis, we are saying the quantity of hamburgers. Here we are saying a quantity of hamburgers are going to be on x-axis. This will be on x-axis. On y-axis, you are going to have that. So you're going to plot the points and join them to form downward sloping curve. So the key idea is the curve slopes down because of diminishing marginal utility. So for example, your graph showing satisfaction from eating ice cream decreasing with each scoop, or a graph showing enjoyment of listening to the same song decreasing after many repeats. So that's what we're saying. So that is what we are talking about. 3.25. So here it is now what I was talking about. Use the information from the above table to draw clearly labeled marginal graph. So we have this marginal utility, we have quantity of hamburgers. So you see here, this is our marginal utility curve. So this is quantity of hamburgers. This is our marginal utility. So this is how is this drawn. So what the graph shows here, the graph that we are on 3.235, the graph, what the graph shows that the graph represents the marginal utility of hamburgers as more are eaten. So the x-axis, which is horizontal, shows the quantity of hamburgers. This is our axis. It shows what? The quantity of hamburgers. But the y-axis, which is now vertical, that is here, we are talking about the y-axis. Then it shows the marginal utility, that is extra satisfaction gained. Hope we understand. So the shape of the graph, as you can see, that meaning it means that the number of hamburgers increases. That is the extra satisfaction increases. So the curve is a downward sloping. In short, the curve is downward sloping, meaning as the number of hamburgers increases, the extra satisfaction decreases. Hope we are clear on that. So the first hamburger gives very high satisfaction. That is around 60 here. So it gives what? Very high satisfaction. But when you come to the second hamburger gives a slightly less satisfaction. That is around 55 here. That is around 55. So it gives a slightly less satisfaction. But if you go to the third and fourth hamburgers, it gives less satisfaction. That is when we can talk about around 20, around 35 and 20, somewhere here. So now it gives us what? A less satisfaction. So by the fifth and sixth satisfaction, it's very low. That is a zero. When you are to fifth and sixth a hamburger. So when you are around here now, that is a very, very slow or zero. But the seventh hamburger gives negative satisfaction around -5. So the person feels uncomfortable or too full. So the important concept shown here, this graph illustrates the law of diminishing marginal utility. So each additional unit consumed gives less satisfaction than the previous one. So that is that. One can ask why the curve goes below zero. When a marginal utility becomes negative, it means the consumer is over-satisfied, too full. Consuming more actually causes discomfort. So that is that for 3.25. Hope we are together on that. So now let us move on to we were under 3.25. Now we are to move on to 3.3. 3.3 is about study the graph below and answer the questions that follow. So we are going to talk about government intervention on prices. Government intervention on prices. So we have our y-axis whereby we have prices, and then our x-axis is about quantity. So it's about quantity. So now let us see the questions so that you can quickly answer this. So 3.31 is about identify the concept indicated by the letter X. Letter X, we are talking about this letter. So the question now wants us to identify the concept indicated by the letter X. Letter X. So now let us go to answers on 3.31. So our letter X from 3.31 is a maximum price. It's a maximum price. So as you can see from the graph, why we are saying it's a maximum price. Here it is, you can see this is a maximum price. This is maximum price. So maximum price, this is where the government sets price below equilibrium. You can see here is our equilibrium. So the prices are set below equilibrium. That is a maximum price. So we can talk of rent control, we can talk of food price limits. So that is maximum price. Maximum price. So that is that for question 3.31. So 3.32, who sets maximum price in South Africa? Who sets maximum price in South Africa? So that is a government. So the government or the state sets the maximum price. Like we've said, the government sets price below equilibrium. So it means it is set by the government. Hope you are to get on that. Now coming to 3.3, briefly explain the term minimum price. So when you talk of minimum price, uh, this is where the price set above equilibrium. The price are set above the equilibrium. So here is our equilibrium. So when the price are set above this, we call it a minimum price. We call it a minimum price where the prices are set above the equilibrium. So we call it a minimum price. For example, we can talk of a minimum wage. We can talk of agricultural price floors. So that is that. So let us go to our answers. Briefly explain the term minimum price. That is when the price is above the equilibrium price for the benefit of the consumer. So that is that. Hope we are together on that. So now let us go to 3.34. Why should government impose a price lower than the market price? Lower price reason we want to know. Why would government impose a price that is lower than market price? Government do that to protect consumers. For example, trying to them to afford bread or avoidable medicines. So that is the reason why they do that. So we can go to our answers on that. Why would government impose price lower than the market price? That is to ensure consumers are able to afford basic goods and services. That is why I talked about bread. They make sure that they can afford bread or afford medicines to protect consumers from exploitation of business, charging high prices. So it's about protecting what? The consumer. That is that. 3.35. 3.35, how would reduction in taxation benefit the economy? Reduction in taxation benefit the economy. So it means tax reduction benefits is going to increase spending power. So it's going to increase spending power. That is how it's going to benefit the economy. More shoppings is going to increase investments. That's how it's going to benefit the economy. That's how it's going to benefit the economy. So here it says, how would a reduction in taxation benefit the economy? A reduction in taxation increases the disposable income of consumer. So increase the disposable income of consumer. This will lead to increased spending within the economy. Like I've said, that will increase what? Spending power. So hope you're together on that. Now we come to 3.5. As it says, how has the implementation of minimum wages advantaged the workers in South Africa? So it's about 3, it's what, 3 point? 3.5. 3.5 says minimum wages benefits. So now we come to our answers. So there is a question that has been skipped, 3.4. So there is a question that I skipped by mistake, 3.4, sorry. 3.4 is about differentiating between complementary and substitute goods. So this is where we are to be. So when you talk of complementary goods, those complementary goods, they are the goods that are used together. For example, a car and a petrol, a phone and a charger. Those are complementary goods. But when you talk of substitute goods, good people, a substitute goods, we're talking about those goods which replace each other. For example, we can talk a butter can replace margarine. A tea can replace coffee. Hope you're together on that. So these are what you call supplemental goods, and as well as substitute goods. So I want us to see here this the difference between complementary and substitute goods. So as it says, complementary goods, these are goods that are combined together to satisfy the need. Like we've said, petrol, car and petrol. So you see, they satisfy, they do what? They are used together. They are used together. Phone and charger are used together. Goods that cannot be used independently, they are complementary goods. Goods that need to be consumed together with one another. So that is that. We are giving example here, CD and a CD player. So that is that. So those are the goods that cannot be used independently. So they need to be used with one another. But substitute goods, like I've said, when you're talking about substitute goods, you're talking about goods that replace each other. As it says, these are goods that can replace other goods to satisfy the same need. Goods that are so similar that they can be bought or used instead of the original goods. Usually substitute goods is cheaper, e.g. butter and margarine, like we've said. So that is that. So now let us be on to 3.5. Now let us be on to 3.5. 3.5 was about how the implementation of minimum wage advantaged the workers in South Africa. Minimum wage. We know that minimum wage improves worker conditions. For example, high income, better living standards. We know that it improves worker conditions when we talk of what? Minimum wage. So let us be on it. 3.5. How has the implementation of minimum wages advantaged the workers in South Africa? They are protected by law and basic human rights. Like I've said, they improve worker condition because of you're going to get a better salary. Your standards of living is going to increase as well. Many farm workers and domestic workers are better off than before. That is true. They enjoy a better standard of living. They enjoy a better standard of living ensure sustainable income, like I've said, higher income. They also enjoy unemployment benefits for which they did not qualify before. They are also entitled to sick leave with pay. So you see, that is that. They are also entitled to annual leave with pay. Women are also entitled to maternity leave without risk of becoming unemployed. So that is that. So this is the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for your time, grade 10s. Make use of this presentation, as it is going to help you very much for you to stay fit for the coming exam that you're going to write in June. Thank you very much for your time.